sports. We start with Robby. What's on your radar?
Well, Kamala Harris is ready for her comeback. That's right. The candidate who has shown no particular talent for winning national presidential elections or even achieving the nomination of her own party via Democratic means is very likely going to run again in 2028. She said as much in a recent interview with the BBC.
Have you made a decision yet?
No, I have not.
But you say in your book, I'm not done.
That is correct. I am not done. I have lived my entire career a life of service, and it's in my bones. And there are many ways to serve. I have not decided yet what I will do in the future beyond what I am doing right now.
But you've been very clear that it's a possibility you might run again to become president. And in my experience interviewing politicians, when someone says I'm not done, it means they are thinking seriously about running.
Yep, she's running. And if Harris was giving up on her quest for the presidency, well, she would have ruled it out explicitly by now. She's clearly leaving the door open because she's going to walk through it. So my question is this: why? Why on earth would she put herself through this again? What was true in the last election cycle and was true in 2019 remains true now. Kamala Harris is a very, very weak candidate for the Democratic Party. When she pursued the presidency in 2019, her campaign faltered so badly from the start. She demonstrated no real ability to connect with some significant constituency of the Democratic Party, and then dropped out before the primaries really got underway. And in 2024, the only reason she became the candidate is because Biden dropped out and handpicked her as his replacement, and then Democratic elites coalesced around her. Now, if we lived under a system where a small number of wealthy, influential, liberal power brokers selected the next president, then yes, Harris would be an obvious frontrunner. Fortunately for her, ultimately the American people decide, and we've already decided that Harris is not very appealing. Don't take my word for it. Here was Bernie Sanders recently lamenting the failures of the Harris campaign to offer an agenda that was attractive to working class people.
Whether or not you stand up and say, you know what, I am prepared to take on big money. I am prepared to stand with the working class. We are prepared, to transform our healthcare system to guarantee healthcare to all people. I didn't hear. I mean, the things that she said kind of reluctantly, we some of us pushed her very hard. I think it's very hard to say that Kamala Harris ran a campaign that spoke to the needs of the working class and was prepared to take on corporate greed and the oligarchs.
On the other hand, Senator Ruben Gallego, who's seen as more of a moderate Democrat, does not want to be on the record straightforwardly opposing Kamala in 2028. So here's his view on her potential candidacy.
Do you think that Vice President Kamala Harris would be a strong candidate in 2028?
I thought she was a strong candidate in 2024. I think there's a lot of strong candidates in 2028. I think she would be a strong candidate also in 2028. And that's going to be left up to the primary voter to decide.
But would you encourage Vice President Kamala Harris to run?
I would probably talk to a lot of candidates and see where they are. I can't say I'll encourage her right now because I want to see what her policy positions are, make sure they align with the voters of Arizona, make sure it's a winning message. But I wouldn't rule it out.
And I would expect most of the Democratic establishment to sound a similar note because, aside from Bernie, they are not too keen to say no to a bad idea. They don't want to alienate who exactly? Who is out there clamoring for Kamala? I'm confused. And who will be profoundly disappointed if she does not run? The truth is that the best thing for the Democratic Party would be if someone could persuade Harris to sit this one out. Her best chance of becoming president was the brief period of time immediately following Biden dropping out, at which point her poll numbers were markedly better than Biden's and maybe competitive with Trump. But then the more she campaigned, the more she revealed her own views on policy, the more she talked at all, viewers liked less and less of what they saw and of what they heard. A big part of campaigning and also serving in office is being an effective communicator, one whose words resonate. Harris does not excel at this. She's often quite boring to listen to. She gives long, rambling, disjointed answers. She's painfully slow to get to her point. Here she was in that recent BBC interview describing her views on Biden's fitness.
Let's be more precise. There is a very serious difference between capacity to be president of the United States and the capacity to run for president of the United States. And so it is on that latter piece that I talk about in the book, about my concern about his ability with the level of endurance, energy that it requires, especially running against now the current president.
Does anybody else find that difficult to listen to, or is it just me? She endlessly stretches the very simple point she was making, which wasn't even a very good point. Obviously, if Biden was not fit to campaign, then he was not fit to serve as president. Campaigning is, yes, a strenuous job. It's not more strenuous than being president, which requires constant and skillful, complex negotiations with other political leaders, both foreign and domestic. There are some important things going on in the world. I'd like my president to be able to handle them. Obviously, now mark my words, if leading voices within the Democratic Party do not encourage Harris to think very, very carefully about whether she's really the right person to go up against J.D. Vance in all likelihood in 2028, they are going to regret it for their own electoral stakes.
I gotta say, solid radar, my friend.
Thank you.
Very thought-provoking, entertaining. I laughed a few times. I will say that the Republican Party understands this, right? President Trump lost in 2020 and then won in 2024. There was a sour taste in many people's mouths, even in the Republican Party, that did not want to see him on that ballot, especially not at the top of it once again. And so I think we have to allow that same breath and space that we gave to President Trump to do whatever he's going to do. Now, while I think that there possibly could be better options out there, I do think that she had a momentum that we can't compare exactly to when she primaried against Biden, because she didn't have that same momentum. People now saw her out there. Some people were upset that she lost, even though President Trump won. Obviously, it was very clear. She only had 107 days. Some of her argument is that if she had a full campaign season and she's going to have to primary, like people argued, against others, and she comes out strong, maybe her messaging changes. Maybe she learned from that practice one. Maybe when she gets the full campaign season, she can really lean all the way in. And so if we gave Trump that luxury to breathe, we need to give Kamala that luxury to breathe. I also think if she takes some strong policy stances and doesn't do what she tried to do last time, is like please everybody, that might be a better move for her, and everybody should have the capacity to do that. I also think she's playing this smart, and I do think she's definitely running, because if you asked me 6 months ago, I'd be like, no, but then she put out the book, and then the way that she has avoided talking about President Trump, I think is a big deal and something that people should look at, because there's other governors, obviously Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, that are very vocal about President Trump. Kamala has been hesitant to say many things. She keeps it very light, a little bit on her book tour, but she's like, I'm not the president. Like, she keeps it very calm because she doesn't want to start this attack season. Well, there's many things to say about President Trump right now. You can go on just pick any topic that she can go off on. The same ones that Pritzker and Newsom are going off on. And I think the way that she's playing it is trying to be smart and strategic, which may be a good step for the Democratic Party. We have to just see where the policies lie.
It's funny that it's the two most likely or most high-profile candidates right now are the choice, the variety the Democratic Party offers you, from a black woman who's a California liberal to a white man who's a California liberal. Such diversity in the Democratic Party.
Pete Buttigieg seems like he's setting himself up to run, so add him in the mix. So I think we're going to see more and more voices step forward. Also, we might see young people make their voice clear within the Democratic Party, which I would love to see. Like,
do you have any young people left?
Well, I could.
They're all in the Republican Party.
Oh, stop! That's where you're going with that. I think that people should really listen to what young people are saying, and if young people are ready to speak, wherever you go, find them. Whether it's in the comments of the podcast, whether it's actually rallying and having conversation with young people. The establishment is the big issue that we disagree on. That shouldn't be the only people you're consulting about what the next steps will be, because Americans largely feel left out of that conversations on both sides of the aisle. So I think the Democratic Party, like I've said multiple times, has a lot of soul searching to do. But they should start with talking to different groups than the people who've been in government for the last 25 plus years. What do you think? Do you think she has a chance?
Oh, I think she has a chance at what? The presidency?
Like primary? Like, do you think she'll even get past in primary?
I think she could be the Democratic nominee because she just has such name recognition. I think it would be a huge mistake to nominate her, because I think she has not shown any special ability. It'll be close, obviously. The election is always close now. She's not who I would want if I was a Democrat to go up against the likely Republican candidate, J.D. Vance. I don't think that's a wise choice at all. But it could be her.
We'll see. Robby, what is on your radar?
You'll like this, I'm sure. Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell has a bold plan for what his party should do if it takes back power in 2028. Bulldoze President Trump's new ballroom. Seriously, I'm not making this up. He recently wrote on X, "Don't even think of seeking the Democratic nomination for president unless you pledge to take a wrecking ball to the Trump ballroom on day one." He got some well-deserved pushback for this unhinged tweet, and so followed it up with a comment that it should be at least renamed the Barack Obama Ballroom. Well, I guess at least that would involve literally destroying something just for pure spite, but it's telling that Swalwell's initial impulse was to tear down what Trump has built, a new ballroom where the White House's East Wing used to stand. Swalwell speaks for many, many Democrats who are throwing conniption fits over the renovation. They've been shrieking about it for over a week now. As I've patiently tried to remind my friends on the left, every single presidential administration has made changes to the White House, some of them just as extreme or more extreme than what Trump is doing. The East Wing isn't even historical. It was a later addition. And the entire White House interior was torn down in the 1940s during the Truman administration and then massively remodeled by First Lady Jackie Kennedy in the 60s. Presidents have added bowling lanes, computer rooms, a basketball court. Now it's Trump's turn. And he's adding a much-needed ballroom, which will allow not just this president, but any future president to host state dinners for a larger number of guests. Let me be perfectly clear. There is nothing inappropriate about any of this. And yet Democrats and the mainstream media are having a full meltdown. It's not just Eric Swalwell. Blue Sky, the social media site preferred by liberal Democrats, is brimming with fury and apoplexy from the Dems. Commentator Molly Jong Fast, for instance, wrote a post naming and shaming the companies that donated to the ballroom funds, which is, if anything, a reminder that this endeavor is being paid for privately rather than by the taxpayers, which should be considered good news. The Mueller, she wrote account, one of my favorites, speculated that perhaps the priceless items in the East Wing were still there as the building was demolished. They're probably buried under all that rubble. Seriously. Elizabeth Warren has tweeted nonstop about how furious she is, and she isn't just tweeting, she also plans to open an investigation into the renovation. Of course, that's her entire ideology in a nutshell. Call yourself a progressive and use government bureaucracy to slow development and thwart actual progress. But I digress. What's actually going on here is that liberal hatred of Trump drives them to love everything that he is against and oppose everything he is for. So even though the average Democrat, much like the average American, had no special fondness for the East Wing, I promise you, because Trump has torn it down, they must pretend they care deeply about it. Thus, newspaper headlines like this one. The East Wing is gone. Here's why it's been called the heart of the nation. The heart of the nation? By who? As my friend Peyton Alexander writes on X, it's incredible how he makes them say things like this. They've completely lost the plot. I can't say it any better, actually, than Glenn Greenwald, who writes, the unhinged and hysterical rage over Trump's remodeling of the old, outdated, crusty East Wing is the type of reflexive anti-Trump meltdown that has so often made valid criticisms of him fall on deaf ears. Classic boy who cried wolf syndrome. Yeah. Credit to the Washington Post, a mainstream newspaper that nevertheless published an op-ed declaring Trump was right to renovate the White House and build a ballroom. The Post only laments that new construction is so much more difficult if you're not the President of the United States, who can wave away onerous government requirements that make development so costly and time-consuming. The Post writes, the White House cannot simply be a museum to the past. Like America, it must evolve with the times to maintain its greatness. Strong leaders reject calcification. In that way, Trump's undertaking is a shot across the bow at NIMBYs everywhere. Well, amen to that. NIMBYs being the not in my backyard people, the people who reflexively fight any new construction, development. The reason we can't build anything, we don't have enough housing, it's because of NIMBYs. Oh no, there's a shadow, it's on my building, we can't build, stop it. The Elizabeth Warren mindset writ large, it needs to be, that's what needs to be destroyed, not the new ballroom. We will destroy a calcified progressivism that prevents us from building and making our country great.
I was going to ask what a NIMBY was. Thank you for breaking
There
that
you
down. So I disagree with Swalwell. Obviously, I'm not one to waste money, right? Okay,
Yes.
you can certify me a cheapskate. I would like to keep all the money. Let's not knock it down. That's a foolish idea. So kind of funny as you read that, because I don't take that seriously, and hopefully the next Democratic president will not either. But I do think why the ballroom is a bad idea in general is because it shows wastefulness as the country is struggling right now. I saw an AP poll that showed most Americans actually are growing anxiety over the state of the economy and certainly uncomfortable with their current day. Only 32% of Americans
How is this
actually
adding
see
to their anxiety?
because
It's private businesses are donating
Robby,
to it.
the government is shut down. People are about to lose SNAP benefits, and the president is spending $300 million with his rich 1% friends to build a ballroom that no one asked for.
None of your money is being spent on this.
I know, but it just shows frivolousness at this time. I'm not done, though. Destruction of a historic site, no matter how many times it's in the news, it doesn't matter about if people talked about it every single day. It's still historical. First ladies have offices there. People walk through there for years. And you say it's not the history. Our country and the White House hasn't been around that long in comparison to world history and countries all over the globe.
The whole
and so
thing was
knocking the whole thing down
in living memory.
Okay, but knocking it all down now takes it even
it all
more.
Down. We're knocking down an unused space where the First
It's
Lady's
the
office.
First Lady. That's what I mean.
But
That's
Melania
not
doesn't use
unused.
the space.
Okay, people say
Melania
that
keeps her stuff in
that's
the
2
residence.
points. People say that it's actually out of scale with the size of the White House. So, like Trump likes to do with all his gold and bedazzled decor, it's maybe a little tasteless to have a huge square block next to a nice White House that's perfectly structured, and then this out of sync huge block. So even architects are like, well, it's going to look ridiculous, like visibly, even aerial from that level. And then it's just a vanity project. Like President Trump wants to do this so he can schmooze with other rich 1% people, like people who invest in his coins and all the different things, or people who from Qatar who send him planes or anything like that. He only wants to have his rich friends that he scratches their back, you scratch mine, and then we all work together and walk in harmony, and you come have a state dinner here. So
That's
while
called
I don't
diplomacy.
while I don't think it should be knocked down, I certainly think that it should be renamed the Obama Ballroom. That I would actually really like that. And you understand specifically why Americans could look at this and say, wow, I wish they could give that $300 million to the American public, because we're suffering right now, because the government's still shut down, and because a lot of people who are vulnerable, which we're going to talk about later, are losing some of their benefits or watching their health care costs rise dramatically. But mind you, y'all are over here getting ready for a party, a $300 million party, to not be in a tent.
This cost them nothing. You're saying it's a party. Diplomacy, maybe Democrats forgot this because Joe Biden was incapable of doing it for 4 years, but the job of the presidency is diplomacy.
Yeah, have we not had events that worked out well under the tents? They worked out really well. I watched them happen.
No, everybody hates the tents.
No, who's everybody? Who's everybody? You can't. Robbie cannot take a broad paintbrush and speak for everyone.
I
hates the
speak
tents.
for literally everyone who said the tents were a bit ridiculous.
No, I just think that, and there's also a process. President Trump likes to skip over the process.
We need to get those
so
remote
generally,
bathroom
there's a
facilities.
national trust for historic preservation. So any other president would have had a dialogue with them, let them know about the changes, had a discussion that includes public comment. They represent public comment. And then to provide a crucial, this is a quote, opportunity for transparency and broad engagement with this board so that we can get this done properly. Why are you yawning? This is what President Trump's pattern is.
We just built 5 new buildings while you were talking about getting all the necessary approvals. We're just going to go
That's how our government works. You talk to the right agencies and people to get.
You talk, permit.
And if you're President Trump, you just do, and then you get sued. Like, so what do you want to do, Robbie? Either one's a waste of time.
We can just do
and then
things
get
now.
sued later.
We
Fine.
can just
If that's how you like to live your life and run our government.
No one's suing him over this. He's allowed to do
I'm just
this.
saying, down the line, this has been a history of this last 10 months or 9 months that he's been in his office, that he does something, and the Supreme Court's like, oh no, he does something, and then he gets a lawsuit from the ACLU. He does something
unconstitutional.
And it's like, okay.
The Supreme Court should check him. But building a much-needed ballroom for the White House is not
much
illegal.
needed
It's
at
not
this
unconstitutional. It's costing the taxpayers nothing, and it shows where Democrats' foolish priorities are.
As always, Robbie, what's on your radar?
Well, Zohran Mamdani is less than a week away from his likely victory in the New York City mayoral race, in which he is widely expected to defeat challengers Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa. That means it's long past time to scrutinize the kind of mayor that Mamdani will be. And make no mistake, despite his as pleasing and friendly demeanor, this is a man with a very radical agenda and extremist views. Now, some criticisms of Mamdani have focused on his identity. He's a Ugandan immigrant and a Muslim, and leans very heavily into his Muslim identity. In fact, he recently suggested that combating Islamophobia in New York City was a very serious concern of his, and he even suggested that a relative of his aunt had stopped riding the subway after 9/11 because she feared Islamophobia. Take a listen.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Now, when some commentators pointed out that Mamdani has no such aunt, he clarified that he was referring to some other relative, a cousin of his father. Now, personally, I don't think that's a very important difference, whether it was an aunt or a second cousin, and obviously I agree with Mamdani that no one should feel bullied or unsafe for being Muslim or for being Christian or Jewish or black or gay or Asian or Hispanic or for any other reason. Other people should be treated well. I do, however, think it's a bit tone-deaf to imply perhaps indirectly that what was so bad about 9/11 was how it made Mamdani's father's cousin feel. He has every right to tell the anecdote, and I don't have enough information to second-guess it, though I will point out that President George W. Bush went out of his way to encourage the nation not to blame 9/11 on peaceful Muslims or Muslim Americans who felt the loss on 9/11 just as keenly as the rest of us. Now, if there's a resentment felt by Americans toward Muslims, that resentment should be countered. It should be discouraged. It should be confronted. Of course, that some who give power to that resentment are people like Zohran's father, Mahmoud Mamdani. Mahmoud Mamdani was twice exiled by his native Uganda and was taken in by where else? The United States of America. Yet here's how he feels about the U.S. This clip went viral on X for good reason.
Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis, this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable.
So Zohran Mamdani's father believes that one of America's most beloved leaders, Abraham Lincoln, was the inspiration for Adolf Hitler's brutal genocide. Does Zohran share his father's views? Does he harbor this level of contempt for his adoptive country? I'd like to know. Maybe New York voters would as well. In any case, there's no denying that Zohran Mamdani is a radical and an extremist, and I'm not talking about his religious beliefs. I'm talking about his support for socialism, his support for abolishing the police, his support for increasing the tax rate to 52%, half your income, more than half, should be confiscated by the government, in his view. Well, that's the real extremism, no pretending otherwise there.
So I thought your radar was really thoughtful because you obviously don't like Mamdani's stances on policy, and I think it's important that you pointed out that President Bush did decry everybody that tried to attach this to all Muslims.
But if any Muslim people were made to feel uncomfortable, I think that's terrible, and that was wrong.
And that's not, I want to point out and elaborate on that point, because we agree upon it. Yeah. But it's important not to pretend that just because the president gave a speech at that time in 2001, that the bigotry somehow went away. Mm-hmm. There was a 17-fold increase on hate crimes in Muslims just in the year from 2000 to 2001 alone. And there was also, it rose by 500% between 2000 to 2009 in 9 years. And so Muslims increased attacks, the same way we talk about anti-Semitism rising in this country and such a huge issue. We should acknowledge that there was a dramatic increase over the years that followed. And so Mamdani, as a New Yorker, as somebody he's living and breathing that experience, wants to make sure that we don't have some of those same things in place that make his community feel
I
othered.
Think organizations that track those statistics, when I've looked at them closely, I've often come away underimpressed or, in fact, feeling gaslighted by such organizations that take in money when they make it look like hate is getting worse and use very interesting counting systems to tally hate crimes. Often
so that's on all sides of the aisle, even when the president is going after
By the way,
the colleges.
Not at all. I don't mean that specific to this category. I mean, that's true of anti-Semitism. It's true of a number of categories that when you try to look more closely at what gets counted as a hate crime, it gets more confusing. That's neither here nor there, but it's part of my overall skepticism of this I think victimhood narrative.
Something that raised my eyebrow also is that according to the ACLU, at least starting at 2002, for the decade following, the New York City Police Department's Intelligence Division engaged in religious profiling of suspicious Muslims in New York City. And so we both talk about that. Tracking people simply because of what they look like is always a problem for both. I think we've agreed on that. And keeping these databases, it makes people uncomfortable and also can cause issues. Me and you have talked about that in a variety of ways.
Right.
When it touches on many people of many communities, even politicians.
Right.
You had an entire, I think, radar about the government officials being tracked.
Tone deaf to emphasize that as the principal harm of 9/11 in his remarks?
No, I think that you can't police what Muslim people could say how they feel about that experience and what happened after. I think it's important to say that two things can be true at once. The attacks on 9/11 were dramatic and horrible, and I think that we should acknowledge that was the worst terrorist attack in our country's history. But also, Muslim people are allowed to feel the way they feel if things were happening to them after that made them feel like they were the perpetrators when they were simply living American lives in the U.S. and just existing and made to feel ostracized because of an incident that had nothing to do with them. I think that that is a fair point that he's making. I also think when you have a parent and say, look at what your dad said, like, this is a grown man. We know that a parent is allowed to feel how they feel and a grown adult man is allowed to feel how he feels. And so you, just like you can't stop and I can't stop. We talked about our grandmothers yesterday from saying anything on social media. Many things I disagree with, agree with. Colin, I told you, he and I share different political views. We live together. I love him. It doesn't matter. The point is we can sit there and have dialogue. Doesn't mean that he directly affects everything I think or say, or if I was running for politics, if I need to echo what he thinks, right?
Well, that's fine. But I mean, his father is a globally recognized leading scholar of colonialist thought and progressive thought. He raised him. Yeah, he's not responsible for those. Oh my God,
we lost our background, but
goodness.
we can still chat about this.
He's not responsible for what his father thinks, obviously, and he doesn't have to necessarily share it. But I don't. It stuck out to me.
And my biggest concern about this whole thing is because you're very critical of Mamdani, and so are all Republicans, and that's fine and fair criticism. But I noticed that this whole thing is a real sleight of hand to me. When I watch people just constantly criticize what he is doing, when I watch Cuomo go on podcasts with conservative podcasters and say, oh yeah, he probably would be laughing or, chuckling about 9/11 and things that just throw off from the point of policy, that's disturbing to me. Because now we're a week out from the election and all I hear people doing is criticizing what Mamdani's saying, but not answering to the real questions that people have about housing, about affordability in New York and all the things that he's speaking to. And even if you think his ideas are pie in the sky, he's speaking to them. And so I'd like to see Sliwa, I'd like to see Cuomo talking more about what they would do differently, even though they're likely going to lose, rather than just trying to tear him down because he has a plan. And we know that when people have a plan, that usually energizes folks to get out and vote. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So I think that they could try to change their strategy here.
Well, we'll see.
Well, what's on your radar right now?
Okay, well, the Republicans are winning the shutdown, and even CNN has to admit it. We turn now to my favorite pollster, Harry Enton, who has some shocking news for his colleagues at the network. Take a look.
If anything, it's been helped a little bit. Take a look here, the shift in net popularity versus pre-shutdown. When we're looking at the Republican Party overall, that brand actually up 2 points. That's within the margin of error, but clearly it hasn't dropped. Come over to this side of the screen. Look at the net approval ratings for Republicans in Congress. It's actually up 5 points since pre-shutdown. So what we're seeing here is the Republican brand in Congress has actually improved somewhat compared to where we were pre-shutdown, despite the fact that Republicans control. And that's the math that John Thune and Mike Johnson are looking at.
That's right. GOP poll numbers are actually up. How the Republicans are choosing to handle the shutdown is resonating with voters. Not just their own voters, but also independents. Let's watch a little bit more.
The base for sure. Look at this. The net approval rating up 12 points versus pre-shutdown. But it's not just with the base. It's also with the middle of the electorate. Look at this. Among independents, it's up 8 points as well. So we've got a situation here where Republicans with the shutdown are actually rallying their base, but it's also something that's not hurting them with the folks in the middle. If anything, it's helping them with folks in the middle. And this is the type of math that if you're Republicans, you like to see, right? Because something could rally the base but alienate those in the middle, or something could rally those in the middle but alienate the base. But the truth is, we're not seeing that.
Yes. Republican voters, the MAGA base, they're excited that the party is sticking to its guns, and independents are also rewarding them for it. Well, I think that's very telling. GOP voters do not want feckless establishment leadership to succumb to Democrats' efforts at emotional blackmailing over health care coverage, welfare payments, and federal employee salaries. Because, let's keep in mind, Democrats are asking for everything in the kitchen sink. They want to maintain the health care insurance subsidies that were intended to be temporary COVID measure. Like most temporary government spending programs, they don't end up so temporary, do they? Democrats now expect them to be permanent. And the Democrats were willing to let the government shut down and say, look, voters, look what those mean Republicans are doing to you. They're willing to withhold your paycheck if you're a government employee. They're willing to take away your welfare. Blame them. Well, it's not working. Republican and independent voters know that, at this point, the Democrats own the government shutdown. They could vote to end it any time. Republicans are ready. But Democratic members of Congress are afraid to go along with this because they fear the anger of their furthest left voters who are demanding that they stand up to the Republicans, even in performative and self-sabotaging ways. Well, they're only hurting themselves because a majority of voters, not everyone clearly, but enough people, are with the GOP on this one. Even CNN's Jake Tapper sounded ever so slightly exasperated with congressional Democrats. Let's watch.
Let me be clear. The administration is choosing to starve American children with money that they already have appropriated.
I'm not applauding their
tactics.
By
the White House.
Well,
this is a choice by the White House.
This
they
is
are
also,
choosing
Congresswoman,
to cut
this is
off
also a
food
choice
assistance.
by Senate Democrats
No,
to not
it is
vote
not.
to open the government. Yes, it is.
He's right. I think plenty of Americans have decided that Democrats own this shutdown now. We'll see how that affects the midterms next year, if at all. Some poll numbers, Lindsay, that got to be bad news for Democrats. If I was Republican seeing that, I'd be like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I would say,
might as well
wow,
keep up
wow,
at this.
wow. Republicans rallying their own base.
And
cool story,
independents.
bro.
And independents.
No, okay, fine. Take that with a grain of salt. I also think the shutdown has yet to really affect the mainstream of all voters, right? So right now we know it's affecting D.C. people who work for the government and work outside of D.C., people who are now looking at SNAP. That starts November 1st. We're not at that date yet.
Yeah.
And so I think as people start to begin to see themselves not be able to fly around for Thanksgiving because flights are canceled because air traffic controllers literally can't handle the situation without getting paid and rightfully want to take their time off and just leave and say, like they did last time, I'm not coming to work because they don't have to if they're not getting, I mean, they could get fired. If people start to get fired like the president is trying to do but has been blocked from doing and literally lets people go that are furloughed and this keeps on, I don't think that the American public who are Democrats, Republicans, and independent in that pool are going to be so pleased with Republicans at that point when they see how this
Republicans
goes.
are not government workers. Government workers are disproportionately Democrats. 90% of them.
No, that's you're just pulling these poll numbers. I want to see the facts and the figures on that. You're just like smirking and saying Democrats are 90% of workers. Like I'm not accepting
federal
that
employees.
No, I want to know. Well, let's give you an example. I love that you're saying that. So remember when Doge did this? Remember when Doge fired a bunch of federal workers, sent them that memo, Elon Musk? Well, guess what? I interviewed a Republican federal worker.
You found one, huh?
No, I didn't find one. There were several, but I interviewed the one of them that I decided to go talk to, and he voted for President Trump and was confused about how Elon Musk was making that type of decision because as a supporter of President Trump, he thought that it was America first, and he got rave reviews from his boss. Okay, he worked in the Department of Agriculture and was confused about why he's being let go by somebody who wholly did not understand his job, which was Elon Musk. So that's one example and taking us way off track. But I think that we need to remember this is one poll, convenient poll. Now, if we look at another poll that just came out, there's an Economist YouGov poll that came out just yesterday. I thought it was alarming to see that yesterday 57% of the country disapproves of President Trump's job performance so far. 39% approve. That's the lowest poll that he's ever had in his, as far as approval rating, in his whole entire first term. The highs and the lows of it, even during COVID. So right now he has his lowest approval rating. He's sitting on planes talking about everybody's so happy with my behavior. So at the same time that Republicans base, he said that everyone's so happy with his behavior because he's like, well, I mean, they want me to run a third term on the plane. Nobody's calling for that. More than half of the country is unhappy with the way that you're handling the country, particularly the economy. And then looking at this poll and saying that Republicans are pleased with this behavior. Okay, well, it doesn't balance out. The crown lays on President Trump's head, and this poll is telling me that more than half of the country, who the president represents, all of America, not just Republican Americans, he should act presidential in this moment and try to help Congress come to a conclusion. It's not ideal that Harry Enton's saying on there like, oh yeah, Republicans are rallying this tactic of like not coming to a solution. Same way that I'm not rallying Democrats to sit there and hold the line. I'm saying come to the table, so should Republicans. They should not shut down the government endlessly and make this the longest shutdown of our lifetimes. That's not a good thing for anyone.
Well, then Democrats
and I don't think that Republicans should be saying that either.
You saw what that woman said to Jake Tapper, that this is Republicans' fault, but you're the people who won't vote for it unless you get everything in the kitchen sink. You want the sprinkles and the cherry. They're willing to give you the sprinkles. You just can't have the
what sprinkles were they willing to give? They want a clean CR pass. There's not one sprinkle in there. And then they're saying down the line we're going to have a conversation. Who would trust them realistically that down the line they're going to have a conversation about health care costs? We're now in November. The Affordable Care Act subsidies are about to expire. And so people are watching their health care costs go from $800 in one KFF study, which is an independent health policy research organization, to $1,900.
Scrap Obama.
Okay, but since we can't do that right now, people actually need health insurance. So from $800 to $1,900 is not
They
feasible.
have health insurance. We're just getting rid of a subsidy that was only supposed to be there.
So you don't mind that the same Americans that are vulnerable in our country that are using the Affordable Care Act to begin with
I
because they
refuse to
couldn't
be emotionally blackmailed.
It's not emotionally blackmailed. It's actually caring about the constituents that you represent.
Then find me something else.
Cut something else, but don't cut health insurance insurance, don't cut SNAP benefits. These are big things. So Republicans should come to the table and have a dialogue about some of the most important things rather than pass things like a big, beautiful bill that cuts SNAP anyway. Like, they're having two conversations that are opposing what they actually do in real time. I like actions more than I like words.
Bring me a scalp. Bring me something to cut, and I will.
Well, Elon Musk tried that and it failed. So find yourself somebody who can do the job well.
Because the government's desire to grow and spread is stronger than even the most principled libertarians' resolve to cut and destroy it, which is why sometimes we have to just not be too particular about this and say, sorry, we're cutting welfare, we're cutting health insurance.
No, that's not the place you start.